Hey everybody, it's Tim Hepworth here with Thursday Night Live Fly Tying and Fly Fishing River Outfitters, and I want to thank you for joining us for another quick tie brought to you by Rocky Mountain Fly Shop. Today we're going to be tying up a saltwater pattern called the Surf Candy. It's an old classic, it's good, it caught a lot of fish, and it's a little bit different than fly than we've done as a streamer in the past, using some more epoxy than actual materials to build it. I'm tying this out of Season 5, episode, focus for me, it's not going to do it, come on. No. 16. Episode 16. I'm tying out of the Season 5 kit. It's also not going to focus, but that is my beautiful face. There you go. If you want to grab one of these, you can still head on over to our website and pick one up today. And because we do all these quick ties every week, you buy the kit, you got all the quick ties for every episode. You can go back and just watch and tie along. Well, let's head on over to the vise and get started on this saltwater pattern. So this is Surf Candy. Quite a bit of epoxy. I'm going to show you a few variations here first. I have a couple different ways you can tie it, and we'll go from there. So first thing we're gonna do is I'm gonna grab my hook, my saltwater hook. I'm not gonna stick it in my vise quite yet. I'm just gonna go over to my kit here. I think and try the old pink and blue Coke bottle variation. So first off, it's a really quick tie. You're just gonna grab your hook, but as you can see here, it's longer than this, so you're gonna have to decide like how you want this to swim in the water. I'm gonna go with a little bit of an angle here. So I'm first just gonna force the eye of the hook into the candy, and by going at a bit of an angle where it comes out, you're gonna see it like this. And then when you got that angry fish coming in for a bite, it's effective fish. I'm telling you, that is the way to go. And a few variations we have here. You've got the impaled bear. It always works well. That's one of my favorites. Classic. You got the old eye of the peach, right? That's also extremely effective. Probably my favorite though, we call this the low-hanging fruit. Great. I think that's the fish slayer. It's mostly it's female fish, but it's that's a good one. So you can add those to your repertoire, and probably that's the easiest way to tie it, but I'm gonna also show you the more difficult way to tie this fly. So this one we're actually gonna have to build with some thread and material, which is kind of lame, but we'll get that hook placed in your vise. This is a saltwater hook. It's important that it is on a saltwater hook because that saltwater is quite aggressive towards regular hooks, as far as it's gonna probably rot out the hook a lot faster. We're gonna go over and grab our UTC, and this is gonna be 140, okay, and some white. I'm gonna start off by putting a nice layer of thread, and I'm gonna take this all the way back down to the bend of the hook. And the reason I'm doing this is we actually only tie material in up at the front, and then we're gonna pull it back over top of this. But what I wanna do is lay a nice white base, covering up most of the hook, but allowing a little bit of that shimmer to come through the hook as well, because it's actually gonna add to some of the lateral line that we're gonna build on this bait fish. So once I get back up to the eye, sitting right here, I'm gonna go ahead and grab my first material. So we're gonna get back to this synthetic material that we actually used a little earlier in the season. Okay, you got a whole whack of it here. If you pull it tight so it's kind of into a strand like so, I'm gonna cut myself off a broad piece, so I'm gonna come to the end like this. I'm gonna measure about 2 or 3 hook lengths down just to, in general, cut a chunk out. And I'm gonna be able to tie a couple flies out of even this one rope that I cut out here. So I'll cut that down. Stuff doesn't cut super well, even with a really good pair of scissors, just the way that synthetic material works. But now I've got this really big, kind of thick piece of this material. I'm gonna pull out any of the kind of individual pieces that are out on their own. And now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna come in here and I'm gonna split this down. So I don't have, I'm taking maybe a third of that clump. So somewhere in the neighborhood of that, okay? This is actually a very sparse material fly. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna come here, I'm just gonna cut this off once, making sure it's nice and even. So when I tie it in, I've got a nice straight edge, okay? Now I'm gonna bring my thread back up to the front here. I'm gonna lay this first material right on top. Keeping it up on top, I'm gonna place a few wraps down towards the eye, making sure that none of that material kind of extends out over the eye. I'm gonna bring my thread wraps back just a bit, about an eye length and a half back from, so if I think of that whole eye length as one length, measure back again, and just a little bit. That's where our eyes are gonna be placed and kind of fused onto the fly here in a little bit. So I'm gonna leave this all at the back, just hanging there. I'm gonna flip this upside down now, come back to the eye. I'm gonna grab another portion of this, maybe a little bit less than last time, but fairly similar in amount. And this is gonna cover the bottom portion of the fly. Same thing, I'm just gonna make sure I get it all roped back up. Come to one side or the other, kind of get any of those strands that are on their own out of the way. And I'll come in here and I'm just gonna cut this off straight. Like I said, it doesn't cut super well, so you kind of gotta work at it a bit. Get it cut like that. And now this time, I'm gonna come in and tie it on the bottom side. So I'll place it right here, tie it in just the same I did the last one, just making sure this stays all on the bottom. Take thread wraps back to the same place where I did on the top. Now the important part here is I'm gonna pull this up and I'm gonna split this material on the hook. So bring it down, lay it on the hook. Half of it's gonna go on one side of the hook, half's the other, and then I'm just gonna bring my fingers down and force it to go around. And what that does is that's gonna give me a nice kind of envelopment of the hook shank itself. Then I can flip it back up to this view. And now as I pull them all back so you can see them, kind of pull them together, I moisten my fingers just a little bit with some saliva. It'll help those kind of solo strands to stay together. And it's gonna look like that. So there's kind of a view of how this is gonna pull back, and you can see how it forms around the hook. That's why I wanted there to be material on the top and the bottom. Now we're gonna go over, you got another color of that synthetic material, and this is in a blue color. Another big clump of it. I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna cut myself off basically the same length of chunk as I did on the top. This fly is not gonna be this long, but it's okay. I'm just cutting out a piece so that I can eventually trim this up to shape. I can set that aside, and now I've got like so. And now I'm gonna take even less than I did on the other ones, okay? This is just like an accent coloring. So that might even be a little bit much, but once I rope it up, no, that should be okay. So we want a little bit sparser than we had already put on those other two clumps in the blue. I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna come in and trim it out. Make sure it's fairly straight cut. And now this one's also gonna go in on top. I'm gonna lay it right on top, capture it, extend some thread wraps forward, back over top. I'm just gonna work a little bit of a head there, just covering up the material. And I'm just gonna lay it in together. Making sure that that blue, you can kind of twist it a bit if you have to, make sure it's right up on top of the fly. So if I turn it to you, you can see it's perfectly on top. Now we only have one more material to put in here, and that's gonna be our flash. So we got this kind of clear opal colored flash here, very iridescent, it picks up a ton of light, it's awesome. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna tie it in once on one side and then on the other. So I'll tie it on the far side first. I'm just gonna cut my piece off of this. It's a little easier to work with. I'm gonna bring this in onto this side of the fly, and it's important because this is building that lateral line on the fly, that this is right perfectly on the side. So I'm gonna come in here, place it, get a couple thread wraps to secure it down, make sure it's level and right in the middle. That's gonna shine right through all the epoxy that we put on here in a minute, or our UV resin. Cut off another length to put on the other side. Come in here, place it, adjust it a bit, make sure it's good. And I'm actually gonna whip finish this fly right here. And then we'll start working with our resins to form the rest of the fly. So quick whip finish, not worried about it too much because I'm gonna be putting a ton of UV on here. So how do I get my shape? How do I get this to look like this? Okay, so it's pretty easy once you get the hang of it. I'm gonna be using two different resins today. So this is Solarez Bone Dry. I use this first, and then I come in here with a little bit thicker stuff. This is called the Thin Hard Formula by Solarez. Okay, and then I'm gonna use this second. Most resins will work and work just fine no matter what you have, but these are just the two that I'm gonna choose to use. So what I'm gonna do first is I'm gonna pull all of these materials back together. I'm gonna make sure I have no loose pieces going anywhere. And I'm gonna build the initial shape of this right here, right now. So you can see by however I hold or pinch is gonna affect how this sits. So if I want it to be a little bit bulkier, right? I mean, that's extreme, but I could push it like so, or I draw it right back and create a more thin shape, which I'm gonna do right here. Pinch there and pull it back. I like it to be a little bit thinner like so. So what I'm gonna do right away is I'm gonna hold this the whole time. I'm gonna grab I like this stuff originally, this bone dry, because it'll get right in and start to sink into the entire fiber. It's not really an outer coating as it is something that'll penetrate and get into the fibers. And I'm just gonna do a nice coating all down the sides, the top, the bottom. I'm gonna make sure I get a good amount in there. I can see it kind of starting to soak in there, and I'll work back to the edge of my fingers towards the bend of the hook, but that's as far as I'm gonna go back for now. Once I get that in there, I'm gonna reach over, grab my UV light, and I'm gonna give this first one a really good cure, because this is the very first chance we have to hold this into its kind of mold and position, and I don't want it to go anywhere. So I'm gonna hold that just like so. And it's important that we used a white thread here, guys, because if we use a different color thread, it would actually show through. We would see it come through these fibers, so it's important to kind of match the coloring. Once I got a good cure on that, I let go. You can see it's gonna hold that position now. I will reinforce it, but for now, I'm gonna leave it there. Now I'm gonna flip it over to one side, and you'll see in your kit, you've got a whole bunch of eyes. A little trick that I like to use is when I take eyes off these cards, I'm gonna grab 2 eyes, stick them on the back of my hand. 1, 2, okay? So I always know where they are, and I'm not trying to work with a finicky piece of paper like this. I always know they're right there. So first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna come in here, I'm gonna put another bit of this thin formula right on the head. I'm gonna set my eye just behind the hook. Make sure it's evenly spaced top to bottom, so the pupil of the eye is kind of center on the hook itself. Quickly show you before I cure it. I'm gonna cure that in place. Now this is just gonna be a temporary hold, okay? This isn't gonna hold this in place forever. Just a quick hold, so it looks like so, evenly placed, and I'll flip it over, do it on the other side. Same thing. A fresh drop of resin. Set my eye on. I really like using this thin hard for actually setting eyes on any streamers I use. I will use it as an initial tool to get them where I want them, and then I might beef them up with some other resin. But once I get that where I want it, I'm gonna cure that. And you'll notice what that's gonna create is, you can see there on the top, it's a bit of a cavern between those eyes. And that's where we're gonna get the chance to come in, build a little bulkier head with our more thick formula, and then work it back down the body. So we're doing pretty good here, guys. Not too much more to do here. Now I'm gonna go over to my thin hard formula, okay? Now I'm gonna start by filling in that gap that you can see right here in those eyes. And then I'm gonna work a little coating back and down. But first off, always be careful because this resin will come out at a kind of a high pace here. So I'm just gonna fill in that space and spread it back just a bit. That's gonna be my first, it looks like a little bubble. And then I'm gonna come back over in a moment and even out the taper on that body by coming off the eyes with a little bit more resin. Do the same thing to the bottom. Flip it upside down. Come in, fill in that gap between the eyes. Push a little bit back to create a little taper. Really want to fill that gap in though, is the most important part. Hit it with the light. You can see how on the bottom I've already kind of built up that taper in that I need to, but I'm still going to build a little more by putting some more resin back down the body. So I'm already here, so I'm going to leave it like so. I'm going to put a little bit more back down the body to the edge of the hook here. And I'm just going to work it in with the tip. Work that bottom section. A little more there. Get it how I like it. I'm going to cure it. A little bit tedious here, guys. We're just basically working with this this UV resin to create this shape. The beauty of this is it moves very smoothly through the water. We leave a little bit of a tail on this fly to give a little bit extra movement, but this just looks like a really nice small minnow. It's gonna dart in the water. Now I'm gonna do this one side. Back a bit. Get that smooth. Cure it with the light. Got one more side to do, and then we're just gonna extend a little bit out into the tail, and then we'll trim the tail and be done. I like to angle mine so you can see how the material almost appears to be angling up. I like that in this pattern. It kind of holds that heavier bottom of the hook's gonna hold the fly at a little bit of a different angle in the water, and by doing this, I think it makes it look a little bit more realistic. Whether that's true or not, it's kind of what I think looks right. So last side here, do a little bit more on this side, making sure I got it smoothed out everywhere. Don't want any kind of bumps forming anywhere. A bit more there. If you get a bunch on, just keep it moving like this, and then it can't really pool anywhere. Cure it. And then just a little bit back into the back end, and we're gonna be finished with this fly. Okay. So now I'm gonna come back. I'm gonna grab this material. When I'm gonna cut it, but not quite yet. I wanna cut a tail that's, in my opinion, I like it to be a little bit shorter than an overall hook shank out the back is where I'm gonna cut it. So I wanna cure just a little bit more because I wanna cure almost right up into the end of what I'm using. And this time, I'm gonna pull it nice and thin. I'm gonna use just this thick stuff, the back end of the fly here. I'm gonna kind of work it down each side. Like so. Let it soak in a bit. Hit it and cure it. Then I'm just gonna cut this and we're gonna be pretty much wrapped up. Okay, now I'm gonna extend my fingers back down again, do my measurement off the hook shank of how, okay, I want it to be just under hook shank and length out the back. Come here, do a straight cut through it. If I've got any other little fibers that are hanging out somewhere, then I can pull those off. Now you're gonna get movement out of the back of the fly here, but the rest of this is just very streamlined. You can see it just looks like a crystal minnow. I changed the colors. You can vary that top color. You could go with more of a silver than white, but this is a pretty classic color for this fly. So guys, this is the surf candy. Don't forget your low-hanging fruit, because that's also a great option for this fly and probably tastes a little better. All right, everybody, it's been Tim Hepworth here with Thursday Night Live Fly Tying and Fly Fishing Blowover Outfitters. We want to thank Rocky Mountain Fly Shop for sponsoring this quick tie. Don't forget to like and subscribe to this video. Hit that little bell icon that's going to let you know every time we have another video coming out, which is going to be another week's worth of tying videos. Only 1 week left next week for a couple more patterns. We'll see you then.